All right, guys, we're back again with the Pat Stedman podcast interview series. We have Adam Lane-Smith, attachment specialist. Adam, I have been, the manosphere or whatever you want to call this space. It's a big community, and there's kind of little micro tribes and corners of it, and you've always been like right over the fence. And I know we've had a couple of people who are bridges, and I've gotten every now and then, like, some of your work will come through and I'm like, wow, that's really good. It's like really insightful stuff. And I've been hearing a lot from people, especially about your major contributions to attachment theory, and just the fact that they've been having some really incredible improvements with their relationships. So I just want to like thank you for, first off, what you've been doing for the broader community and helping people. And I'm really excited to go into this stuff in the conversation because I know attachment theory, but I don't have your level of specialization in it. So I'm hoping to learn something myself here. But before we get into all that stuff, from what I understand, you have a pretty compelling story. I'm curious about how you got into this space. You're a retired psychotherapist, from what I understand. Is that correct?
Hold on just 1 second. I lost sound for some reason all of a sudden. I lost you at the end.
Can you hear me?
Oh, wait a minute. Did that work?
I can hear you fine. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you can hear me, but I can't hear you. All of a sudden, my AirPods just died on me. Let me put them back in and let me take them back out.
For sure.
Technology's great, right up until the point when it doesn't do what you think it's going to do.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Can't hear you yet. Let me see. Show Bluetooth devices. I could hear you perfectly at the beginning, and all of a sudden, AirPods, disconnect, and connect. Let's try that now. Can I hear you now?
Can you hear me?
No, all of a sudden it's just killing me. Speaker changed. Oh, wait a minute. I apologize for this. This is it's working perfect, and all of a sudden, not. Speaker changed. Default. Wait a minute. I think I hear you now.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfectly. I don't know what it was, boy. Sorry about that. All of a sudden, Skype just decided it hated my AirPods.
So what I was about to say, I don't know, what was the last thing that you heard me mention when we jumped into it? What was the?
Boy, I missed a bunch. I think I missed a bunch.
Okay.
Give me just a brief version of what the last piece was that you wanted to jump into, and you can save your nice intro that way.
Sure. I mean, they got the intro anyway. So
Cool.
you know your stuff. You know your intro. You don't need to hear me intro. So I know you have a very compelling story, and I'm really curious about how you got into this field, what took you through this entire path. And I know that you used to be a psychotherapist. That's correct.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you've moved more into attachment specialization. So just kind of take me through that. Take me through the arc of your work.
Yeah. So 6 years in school through a master's degree. I grew up in a pretty rough area in a pretty not very good city. Meth was, I think, one of our biggest exporters of exportations for a city. I'd walk to school. There'd be, walk to the library. There's homeless people overdosing right next to the library. And I was always wondering, like, why? What is going on that this is happening? Why don't these people have families to go to? All of that kind of good stuff. I grew up in a rough family myself. Extended family was a mess, I should say. Um, there's all kinds of things going on. So when I decided what I wanted to do, I wanted to go to school and help people to get better and connect to their families better. I didn't know the word attachment back then. I went through 6 years of school to get my master's degree, 3 years of apprenticeship under 5 different clinicians with 4 different licensure types. Did my training in one state, moved to a different state, did my therapy there, got my license. And everywhere I went, I just kept coming back to this belief that there's something here at the core of the human experience that we are supposed to be connecting to something that is missing. Where is it? What is it? It's the family systems that are supposed to be there. And I couldn't for the life of me figure out what it was, because in school we are taught, in therapy school, in graduate school, we are taught attachment only matters for little kids. You only diagnose attachment issues in little kids. You diagnose conduct disorders in teens and personality disorders in adults. And that's it. That's all you have to think about. Don't do anything else. Otherwise, it's a full-on diagnosis of some other disorder. Don't even talk about attachment. There was this dude named Bowen who wrote these ideas way back when about what attachment could be. And let's not worry about that. Let's focus on medication and focus on treating disorders, classify them, get them in there, start working on them. I had a great supervisor at one point in one of the clinics I worked in who said, "What do you think this guy's real problem is?" Because I said, "Man, I think it's attachment. It's reactive attachment disorder. That's the only thing that fits." But he's not 5 years old. He said, "Adam, if it fits, just diagnose him." And that began this whole slide away from faith in the medical system toward what else is there that really describes this, the attachment piece. And once I saw, it's like seeing the lines in the matrix. Once you see the matrix, you can't unsee the matrix. It becomes attachment is at the core of this, and nobody is wanting to talk about it. Let's talk about it. And that became the focus of my work. So I had to teach attachment. Very few people are teaching it. And to do that effectively and to coach internationally, I could no longer hold on to my license. A license only allows you in the United States here to work in one state, at least the state I was working in. One state, no coaching, otherwise it's treated like therapy. No one outside that state, no one outside the country. And that was it. So I could either teach people in one state, or I could go internationally and define my own job. So here I am as an attachment specialist. That has been my work, and that's everything I teach now is attachment.
Wow. So, okay, so you diagnosed this guy. This is how it all started. You diagnosed this adult with reactive attachment disorder.
Yeah.
But what does that look like? So it's normally for children, but what does it look like in an adult?
Yeah, so attachment issues in adults, there's 4 different types of attachment for adults. There is secure attachment, which is attachment is the ability to give and receive love with other human beings, to believe that they will act in good faith towards you, that they will care about you, that they'll be human and treat you like a human, that you can connect one-on-one instead of having to push each other's buttons to try to get what you want. It's that belief that there is a bond between you and people will give you a fair shot. And that's secure attachment. And there's 3 types of insecure attachment. There is avoidant attachment of people have hurt me. There's no way I can trust other people. There's something either wrong with them or wrong with me, but it makes them attack me, and I can't trust them. I can't connect with them. I'm not going to open up. I'm not going to share my needs. I'm not connecting to anyone, and I'm going to keep stepping back when someone tries to step toward me and build intimacy with me, because it is just not safe. Then there's an anxious attachment style of there's something wrong in me that everyone else can see, but I can't see what it is. But when they see it, they recognize I'm worthless and they abandon me. So I never can open up and show people who I am. I have to do nice things for them and earn their approval and constantly play this game of earning people's approval without ever showing who I am or asking for my needs to get met. And they will let me stay around them because they'll be so grateful for what I do for them. And then the third one is anxious avoidance, also called disorganized, of I'm avoidant, keeping people out, but then I connect a little bit and I draw them in and I'm just absorbed and I can't let it go. But then I freak out and I push them back out because I don't want to get that close. Oh, but I really do. And I pull them back in. And those are the 3 insecurity types of attachment. It really boils down to I can never get close to anybody else. I can't open up. I can't connect, or something terrible is going to happen. But I really want it. So I'm going to find ways to kind of get something that feels like it. That's right. The 3 different pieces.
So when you have, I mean, I've used these terms sort of loosely before, especially anxious and avoidant. Sure. One of the things that's very interesting to me about attachment theory, and I think a lot of people get confused about it, because when you have, like, well, let me start by saying this. In surface behavior, at least, men seem to be more avoidant and women seem to be more anxious, right? And how they express it. Now, my question for you, though, is that a core aspect of their attachment, or is that just sort of like, 'cause I know that there's something called protest behavior. And so could an anxious guy act avoidant if he's also with an anxious girl, as kind of like, because it almost seems to me that at a certain point, even if like in the beginning of a relationship between 2 anxious people, it's like they're super codependent and like devouring each other, that there's a certain point where one flips and then pulls away.
Yes.
So explain that how that
Yeah.
works.
So what you're looking at with the avoidance piece is a lot of people with avoidant issues, a lot of them end up in hookup culture because it allows you to engage in a pseudo intimacy that is almost like playing at pair bonding with the other person. But the women who are in hookup culture who have avoidant attachment are the ones bragging about how they've never physically climaxed with a partner,
Yeah.
and they don't care. They'll just use men. It's no big thing. That is the women with avoidance, where they find nice guys and then they like nope once and ghost them. They're the women who jump up afterward and they're like, all right, I'm out of here. And they're trying as hard as they can to be masculine and seem strong. Those are usually women with avoidant issues that treat other people somewhat poorly. Men with avoidant issues, very similar. Whatever, I can do whatever I want. I can spin as many plates as I need to. How dare you get feelings for me? I know, of course, I don't have feelings for you. You know, the pump and dump, the ghosting and all of that kind of stuff. That behavior is a lot of avoidance. But these people also do get married. They get married, but they usually get married to someone with an avoidant style. So the avoidant style, will that's what's called love bombing. They will saturate them at the beginning with attention, kindness, and flattery, and then start backing off. And then the anxious person will chase them to earn their approval. And the avoidant person will keep pulling back until the anxious person gets tired of chasing. Then the avoidant person will reward them a little bit and then start pulling back, and the anxious person will start chasing again. And it creates this perpetual cycle. But that it is men and women. And sometimes, yeah, they can flip a little bit when they get threatened, because the goal for both is to never let anyone in close enough. That attachment style really covers what you do most of the time. But yeah, sometimes people who are both anxious style and they end up getting together, they can become avoidant because they don't. If the other person starts chasing them too much, they back way off, and they embody some avoidant behaviors because they're terrified of being revealed for who they are on the inside, of being worthless, being garbage. So yeah, they can flip as necessary. If the attachment style can change, you can heal it and you can change it and become secure. It just really dictates how you prefer to handle relationships, what you're most familiar with, what your parents programmed you to do most of the time to keep yourself emotionally safe as a child.
So what is like an anxious, I mean, an anxious woman is kind of the classic sort of needy, not very developed sort of in herself woman who's always chasing affection and always always chasing the emotionally unavailable guy. Would you say that's a pretty...
Oh, big time. Yeah, they do. They will do anything to be loved, even though they don't believe they deserve love. So they honestly they go to guys who mistreat them because being mistreated feels more honest to them. It's what they think they deserve.
Yeah.
So then they find guys who treat them poorly and they complain about it, but they really say, well, he's really just giving me what I deserve. And so she'll try to do nice things for him, hoping he'll figure it out and be grateful for her. But she never really expects him to. It's an ugly circle. It gets worse when they have kids. But
And so, what kind of relationship dynamics do you usually see with this? Because I mean, I know that obviously a secure relationship is the one that you want to have, and so if you have at least one party as secure, that makes it a lot easier to start to build a healthy relationship. But, and we can get into that. I do want to talk about how you do that. But with, an anxious and avoidant pairing, because I get this sometimes with clients, and maybe he's anxious and the girl's avoidant, and it's always so tenuous because I don't want to say that it's ever impossible to move both of them to secure, but it's definitely a very like precarious situation to be able to do it. And when you say that most of the time when you don't have a secure individual, like anxious and avoidant dynamics, how do you end up when you have two broken people, like seriously broken people, how do you get to the healthy place?
That's a huge question. The biggest first step that determines if it's going to work is if both people are able to realize and accept and internalize that there's a different way to live. Because the problem with both people is that they don't believe there's a better way, and their brain is screaming at them, if you try to deviate from the path we have set, we are going to get hurt and die. So do not deviate from this. Don't connect. Don't open up. It takes hearing a podcast like this, which is why I talk everywhere I go about attachment. It takes hearing about like this, someone telling them, watching a video, reading a book. It takes learning about it and then actually believing it's possible before they can even begin. Otherwise, that's what's a big piece with people who have avoidance is they tend not to get better in relationships because the relationship enables them to never have to get better. The circumstances have to change so badly and they are so miserable or stand to lose so much that they finally say, okay, fine, I'm willing to take a look at this. Let's give it another shot. And that's usually when the other person has tried for 5 to 10 years and is ready for a divorce and says, okay, let's get a divorce. And the avoidant person says, oh, wait, I'm willing to try now. And that's by that point way too late because the other person has just run themselves ragged talking for 10 years. That's usually the problem. If you can get an avoidant person to believe that there is something better, they can change. 100% they can change. Anxious people are a little bit easier because they're so miserable all the time that they are desperate to believe there's something better out there. So when you tell them, it's like a miracle has happened to them and they cry almost every time. They cry and then they're relieved and they thank you for telling them about it. And they read everything they can and they become obsessed with attachment. The avoidant people do that, but only after it's bad enough that they have to. That's just kind of how it goes. So you got to reach that point with them.
Well, I guess you could say that at the core, the anxious and the avoidant person have the same problem, but the anxious person is a little bit more honest about it with themselves. So they're maybe that extra step, like they're
Right.
honest about that they're not getting what they want.
Yeah, well, think of it this way. If you believe you are the problem, and then you hear that other people are willing to help you a little bit and that there is hope, suddenly you have all these people that could help you as long as the fear that you're garbage isn't true. It's that easy. It's if I can believe I am worth something, that if there's even a sliver of hope, then I have all these people to help me. When you have avoidant issues, your belief is that everyone around you is just waiting for a chance to hurt you, exploit you, mistreat you, spit on you. So it's like, okay, attachment right be real. I might be able to trust somebody, but who do I trust? And that's their first thought is, now I have to build a list of people I'm even willing to trust that could be an option. Anxious people just explode out and they want to tell everybody that they've ever known about attachment. It's a hard battle to fight.
Right. It sounds like a lot of the red pill stuff is pretty avoidant.
Red pill, that's my problem with it, is it has so much good truth and old wisdom that hasn't been maintained in most circles from father to son and grandfather to grandson about evolutionary psychology, about what men and women want. It has those, but then it takes a darker turn often of, okay, so if this is how it is, women should all behave like avoidant, and here's how women are. They're either avoidant or anxious, and here's how to make them act anxious by you acting avoidant. And it's pitched at being healthy. And instead of ever having to get healthy, the person with attachment issues just switches to a fully avoidant style and then gets rewarded endlessly with attention from anxious women. So it feels true. It feels great. And then they go for years and years and years until they're miserable usually. And then they start questioning it. And it's supposed to lead into a deeper conversation about, well, what else is there? If I could make this, what could I change to that's better than this? That's where it's supposed to go.
So this is interesting. So with guys, I mean, obviously there's some guys, or at least for certain periods, where if they're avoidant, let's say they're avoidant attachment, and they're so avoidant that they don't really show how they feel, what they really want, right? They keep that sequestered, but there's psychic leaking, right, that occurs. So what does that look like in a relationship? Like you have a guy who is acting like he's, tough, or I don't know, talk a little bit about what this looks like for an avoidant guy and what are the tells within a relationship.
Yeah, good question. It's the guy who has one or two male friends he can connect with, but he never connects with the woman in his life. He just never can fully open up to her, never fully trusts her. He might tell jokes behind her back kind of thing, minimizes the relationship. He does love her, but he is not open to building a team with her. It's like two individuals who happen to be sharing a relationship, And she just happens to be connected to him through specific bonds that he doesn't maybe want to fully define, because that would put a lot of responsibility on him. So those men who are afraid of that responsibility, because then they're trapped, then the other person can start exerting leverage on them to use them, hurt them, whatever that might be. And this gets really complicated when they're married, especially when they have kids, because when women have children, when they give birth and when they breastfeed, they get flooded with oxytocin and all these bonding hormones, and it forces them to bond to their children for like sometimes the first time they've ever felt in their life. They've never had these healthy cocktails of chemicals. So then they freak out and they want to take care of children. These mother instincts like kick online, like way more than even most moms. They're like deeply invested in their children, which is great. But then they start looking at the dad, who's avoidant often, and they start seeing him as a threat to the children, because the children are anxious because they're not getting the good connection from dad, the attachment, those pieces that should be there. They're not getting those from him. So they start to get anxious. Their behaviors are kind of weird. Maybe dad fights with the kids a little bit. He's trying to keep them at arm's length. He loves them and he bonds with them as much as he understands. But there's still a disconnect. There's still that disconnect. And she starts like pushing on him and nagging him, and then barking at him and being mad at him and angry at him, be like, fix what you're doing, change what you're doing. And he has no idea what she's doing or why, because he doesn't experience the flood of hormone changes, the healthy chemical bonding changes that she has, that's making her see the difference. And she doesn't have the words to help explain what. She doesn't know what attachment is. She's just like, what? Just love our kids. It's like, I do love our kids. No, love them. No, I do love them. No, don't. And it's that fight, and that goes on, till the kids are teens. And by that point, mom has blamed dad for everything bad that has ever happened in their family, blames him for the kids not being happy, often then builds an alliance with the kids against dad. It's mom and the kids versus dad. And then the kids are growing up into their teens, and they end up divorcing, all of them divorce dad. And dad has to go off and live in an apartment somewhere. And dad's like, what happened? Everything I've been me. I never changed. You guys changed. Why am I excluded from this family? That's what that dynamic usually is. And it's that avoidant guy who he doesn't get it. He's like, I don't understand what has happened. That's him through his entire relationship, as people become more emotional, try to charge into his space, try to take him and make him be responsible for things. It's all those demands. It's hard, and he's constantly dodging them. That is the male experience, start to finish, dating, marriage, kids, everything, with avoidance style.
That was incredible. And what's so funny is that, speaking of like Matrix references and stuff, you can totally see, you have a guy who goes through this whole experience, and this is what a lot of the red pill guys will classically call a blue pill experience. So it's like they were avoidant throughout their entire relationship. The woman left, and then they said that what they learn is that they actually weren't avoidant enough.
Yes. You weren't controlling enough. You should have actively controlled her instead of just leaving her to her own and giving her love when she asks for it. You should have actively made her afraid. And next time, pick a woman who is really anxious and control her into the ground. And that is the only that you are going to be able to keep women in your life. That is the red pill experience. That's unfortunately what it is.
Well, it seems like there's two philosophies in terms of how do you get what you want as a man. And the red pill one takes this trajectory, which is that desire maybe is the main issue. And that the issue wasn't that you were avoidant. The issue was that you didn't have enough leverage.
That's right. That's right. As if women are just a walking collection of hormones, and you just have to push the right buttons, and the hormones will surge, and you will then control her. Yeah, that's exactly what they're doing.
Yeah. And then there's this other way, which is more about connection, and I guess you could call it comfort, right? Not that the desire portion doesn't matter, but that this is the main thing that's going on, which is that you're not connecting with the other person. So we have this avoidant guy, and he's got two paths in front of him. I think actually in some ways you could walk both of them, because you can become more desirable even as you focus on connection, right?
Yeah.
But the big thing here is like, so what does it look like? What is that avoidant guy who's starting to see this stuff occur? Especially because I think that what you mentioned here is really important, because a lot of the stuff that these guys talk about in one of the reasons that's so preached never get married is because as you get married and have kids, exactly as you're saying, it's like it affects the attachment dynamic, so they lose leverage. They say don't do it because you're going to lose the leverage.
Yep.
So what if a guy is going to get married, he is going to have kids, but he's got this avoidant tendency, and this he starts to see some of these things you're talking about. You know, she's got kids, his wife's got kids, she's starting to nag him more, and she's not really feeling him there. It's kind of like she's not actually feeling his presence there. Like, oh, like, you know, you act like you're single, right? So what can that guy do? What can he
The
do
number one
to change that? Yeah.
the number one thing I tell guys is do not try to reconnect with your wife at that point, because the problem is not your relationship with your wife. If you've got kids and she's nagging and causing that, the problem is not the relationship with her. The problem is the relationship with the kids, and that she's seeing you as a threat to them, an existential threat to their well-being. And she can't just kill you, because then the kids would still be sad because they lost their dad and didn't have a bond with you. The only out that she's trying to achieve is that you bond with your children. When you do that, when you bond with, choose to repair your attachment, I've got a billion resources to help do that. That's why I'm a coach now. Repair your attachment, fix that, and start teaching it and bonding with your kids. The principles of it are very simple. When you learn the fundamentals of it, they're very simple. And then you talk with your kids about it at whatever the age they're at, and you start repairing their attachment. When you do that, your wife sees that, and you become an incredible asset in the lives of her children, because she experienced that flood of bonding chemicals she's never experienced probably with almost anybody else in her life with her children. Her children are now the focus of her life. Whether she's controlling over them or not, they are her focus, her obsession. You need to get in and repair those relationships with those kids, and that will start boosting their mental health. It'll ease their anxieties, any depression that they might be having, any hardship they're struggling with. On, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the pyramid, the levels, attachment, people think it's level 3 of its love and belonging, but it's not. It's level 2. It's safety and security, because it's the belief that you are not safe or secure anywhere, because no one will love or accept you. So when you build that attachment and heal it, you fix their security and their stability, and then their brain gets out of panic survival mode and gets into easier mode of let's bond, let's enjoy the bond. Then their academics goes up, their achievement goes up, their self-esteem goes up. Then your wife sees that, and you become like the god of parenting to her, because you've brought your child back from the dead and you've healed her child that she's obsessed with. And then she craves to build a relationship with you, because you can apply the exact same principles that you fix that relationship with your kids. You can apply that with her exactly the same. And you've bonded together through bonding with the kids and repairing that relationship. You've got all kinds of hormonal bonding with your wife going on. That right there is the pathway. When a father does that, it's like the marriage just heats up. They have like a second honeymoon after that, because he has done what she desperately craved somebody would step in and do for her kids. That's it. That's the process.
So what does that look like for the guys? It's really just about being more present. Like, is there like avoidant guys tend to, mentally check out? Like, what are the so they mentally check out. What else do avoidant guys tend to do?
Yeah. So it's pushing buttons on other people to get results and feelings from them. Not like a sociopath would. A sociopath is an extreme example of this. Of I don't care if I hurt you or exploit you. It's pushing buttons on people to make them act a certain way that you think is best for them and best for you. And you're acting upon them instead of acting with them. The way that attachment works is you learn to stop, surrender half the control to the other person, and then have a conversation with them and say, here's what's going on. Informed consent. Here's what's going on. Here is what I'm kind of urged to do, and I'm feeling this urge to just push your buttons, but I don't want to do that. Here is what's actually going on. What can we do together to address this problem? How can we solve this together as a team? It's building that intimacy. It's sharing your internal thoughts, sharing your internal struggles. I've got a 5-year-old son, and I do this with him. When it's bed, he doesn't want to go to bed. I sit with him. I don't just, you're going to bed. I don't do that. I sit with him and I explain why it's in his best interests. I explain why my needs, why I've got needs for him to go to bed, so I can go to bed too myself, get some rest. I explain how our family kind of needs it, and I hear him out. I'm like, what do you want to do? Why do you want to stay up late? Well, I want this. Okay, well, you could do that for the next 10 minutes and try to like sneak. He's like a ninja. You can sneak like a ninja and try to climb out of your room and try to do all kinds of stuff for the next hour or whatever. And it'll just make us more and more frustrated, and that won't be good for us. And you'll have some fun for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, but if you do this, you're going to get great rest, and here's what we can do tomorrow. It'll be fantastic. He's like, wow, that's right. And he rolls over and goes right to sleep. It's work together as a team. Even if you're using persuasion, you're not manipulating. It's refusing to act upon and choosing to stop and act with. That is the core of healthy attachment. And everything is about getting you to a point where you believe that's possible, where your brain lets you because it doesn't think you're going to die, where your anxiety levels are low enough that you can go out and do it without stopping yourself. And you can start working with other people, and the experience of it changes you because you realize I can work people. I don't have to act upon them. It feels better to work with them. They like me more. It makes me feel good as a person. This feels wonderful, and it becomes chemically addictive because you start getting what's called serotonin. Serotonin should be flooded through us because of healthy relationships. It's usually low in a lot of people, especially here in the United States. And low serotonin is a huge predictor for depression. You can almost like chart them together. That right there is how you start building serotonin into your relationships. You start crushing depression. That's why it's supposed to become through cooperative relationships instead of acting upon. So if you have any avoidant pieces, anyone who's listening, start looking at where you are acting upon people and choosing to act without their knowledge, and start thinking about ways you could act with instead.
Yeah.
That's it.
I mean, it almost sounds like, SSRIs are like serotonin reuptake things, right? So, I mean, it's basically that a lot of that is because people aren't getting the attachment, the relationships that they need to feel.
It's big time. Big time. When you look at the things that give you serotonin, I mean, there's cardio, and there's workout, and there's lifting, and there's eating good foods, and there's meditation, and then there's hugs, good conversations, spending time with your loved ones, good quality physical intimacy, all kinds of just this huge everything in good relationships. Every moment of good relationships, every quality moment of good relationships floods you with serotonin. And we're evolved animals. We are meant to have a tribe around us, our family, our village. We're meant to have open relationships with very few walls or doors or secrets or phones, where everything is out in the open, and we have to be pretty direct. So we have to cooperate. We don't have to cooperate much anymore, and we're choosing the path of not cooperating. When you choose to cooperate, you get flooded with healthy serotonin. And I haven't met very many people who have secure attachment who have depression. I just have not in any of my work.
So one of I think the challenges for some guys who are maybe moving away from avoidant attachment is what happens when they open up in a relationship about how they feel, but then the woman pulls back.
That happens.
What is that an indication of? Is that an indication of the woman herself having some? What would her attachment style be?
So there's a number of reasons that can happen. Like I said, a lot of avoidant guys, they wait until it's pretty much too late, and he's burned all his bridges with her, and now he's willing to try. It's like, we're getting divorced, I'm willing to try. That really is how it tends to happen. They don't change for the relationship, they change for the circumstance. When this happens, you have to have a lot of avoidant guys are still trying to push buttons. So then they choose to open up without explaining why. And I say, dude, you got to open up your wife and connect with her more. This will build emotional intimacy. This is how it gets healthy. And they'll say, well, do I have to tell her that's what I'm doing? Yes, please do. Otherwise, she's going to freak out. Because what happens is when you start connecting to a wife who's angry and resentful, and you start doing better, she gets worse on purpose, because she's hoping that if you are fake this time, again, a lot of guys, they promise and promise and promise. That's part of the game. They promise that they're going to get better. They change for about 2 weeks. Her nagging goes away. He goes back to how he was. And they play this game for 10 years. She is tired of that game, and she thinks you're faking it again. But now it's even more convincing because you've actually changed this time. So it's more convincing, which scares her more. She gets worse. And she does not want you to get close now because it's going to hurt even more than it ever has. And she doesn't trust you now. So you have to walk up out of your trench, walk forward as she's firing bullets all around you, warning shots over and over and over, screaming out she's going to shoot you. And you have to continue until you reach her trench and let her shoot you if that's what it's going to take. And that is all that you can do. It really is believing that she's going to get worse, knowing that she'll get worse, but choosing to change for yourself. By the end of week 2, what she's waiting for is to see you start easing off and easing back out of the behaviors. You should be picking up steam by the end of week 2. By the end of week 3, she expects you to be fully back in your behaviors. You need to be exponentially up here, having fully changed for you, not for her reactions. Expect her to get worse and be willing to lose the marriage if that's what it takes to get healthier. And that's the only way to fix it, because you're going up, and eventually will tell you to calm down and stop being so healthy because she can't keep track of what you're doing. And you're going to say, this is what it is. Here's where I am. And you'll keep going, and she mostly will follow you. The research shows that 90% of women, when their husband converts from one religion to another, will follow him into the new religion. Almost every woman that I've ever seen where a man authentically changes his attachment style follows him eagerly into the new attachment style, as long as he gets through that initial phase of hell where she's testing him to see if he's faking. Because she wants you to break. If you're going to break, she's going to break you. It is really making you do it. So the guys who do it and then get upset because she's not responding well, you're not changing. You're changing for her. You're still pushing buttons and trying to achieve outcomes. Change who you are for the sake of you and your health and your relationships, and everything else will flow from that. But expect her to get worse. Expect her worse if it's been a few years.
So that's really good for guys hearing this to understand, because, not that I'm, trashing the audience thinking that they just want, get attached quick schemes.
Yeah.
But to know that there is a natural part of it getting worse before it gets better. Yeah. And, I'd also add, I'm curious what you think, but that it can almost feel for the woman a bit threatening, in the sense that he is changing. It's emotionally threatening for her, because she may want him to change, but then, everyone says, oh, I want this person to change, but then you look at the couple and you realize that they have this codependent behavior. It's like they have their patterns. And so when one person breaks a pattern, the other person necessarily has to change their pattern as well.
Yeah. There's usually 2 things that go through a woman's mind when her husband starts changing. One is either this is fake and it's going to hurt even more if I believe him. And that's usually years into the relationship when she's now resentful. The other one is he's changing. What if I don't have a place in his life after he's done getting better? That's the other piece. Women get terrified. Even if the husband starts lifting weights, she gets nervous because now he's going to start looking better. And then she starts worrying, well, where am I going to be when he's like super jacked and fit and hot? What am I going to do? Where am I going to be? That's the second fear. And it's both. And it's terrifying when your husband starts changing, especially if you don't believe he's authentically changing in a good way. You think he's faking it. You think he's discovered a new game to try to trick you into intimacy. And that's horrible for the avoidant guy, because he's legitimately changed. And the first person he wants to open up to is his wife. And the first thing he gets is a bullet shot past his ear of don't you dare come over here and try to be close to me. That is why a lot of avoidant guys then try to almost give up. Sometimes they do, because they're like, I have lived my whole life being miserable. I'm 40 and I want to connect, and I finally get it, man. I want to build this with you. And she's like, don't you dare come over here. Don't even talk to me. I don't even want to hear from you. In fact, you're talking about being closer. Well, then fine. You can move out of our bedroom. He's like, you've been wanting me to get closer. Nope, get out. I don't even want it. That's the worst thing, because now it confirms all his worst he ever experienced. It confirms all his terrors, all the beliefs that people will hurt him if he opens up. That's why a lot of guys with avoidant issues, they try to open up, they get smashed, and then they turn super hardcore dark red pill. It's a lot of guys do, because that's the first thing they've experienced. It's horrible to watch.
And a large part of this is also, as a guy, you almost have to get an assessment for the woman herself. Because if a woman really does love you and want to be with you, then this is exactly what she wants, right? She wants you to open up. She wants to connect more with you. But I think a lot of, it's as they say, live by the sword, die by the sword. A lot of these guys, they have their selection issues. So they go after women who are down to sort of play this this winner take all game. And so they go and they, if they're dating a woman who's, well, would you say that those women are maybe they're anxious themselves and the guy starts being open? She's expecting him to be emotionally withdrawn, and when he's not, right, she links his values lower, and then so she separates. And very often those women, from my observation, can be really, really cruel. They'll move on to another guy really quickly because they want a new attachment really quickly. And so these guys say, like, okay, well, all women are like that. It's like, well, anxiously attached women are like that. Maybe,
It is. Anxious women, it's a roll of the dice what they're going to do if their avoidant partner, even an anxious partner, starts healing and starts changing. Sometimes they will be like super thrilled and pumped, and he starts feeding them like warmth, bonding, oxytocin, and serotonin and dopamine, feeding all these cocktails that they've always wanted. Then they get hooked and they're like, oh, how do I get more of this? I'm so terrified, but I'm even more enthralled than before. And they start kind of leaning into the relationship, and they'll start following him if he's confident. If he's not confident, if he's like stumbling, or if he's connected to an avoidant wife, avoidant and avoidant together is like gasoline and fire. It's horrible. So a lot of times when a guy has avoidance issues and he starts trying to fix it, his wife has avoidant issues and starts saying, oh, I don't want that. And no, I don't want to build. And she will start pushing back. And they are, that's one of like the worst pairings you see is two avoidant people, because they just rip each other apart. Anxious usually does the right thing and connects. But yeah, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they are so anxious that they are headed toward a full personality disorder. Like borderline personality disorder is an extreme version of this. Anxious, sometimes they're headed so far in that direction that he starts changing and healing, and it scares the crap out of her. So she runs because she believes he's going to finally discover how worthless she is. And she says the end is coming. He's going to break up with me. It's going to hurt less if I'm going to break up with him. And she'll smash the relationship. She'll cheat on him purposely to try to sever the relationship. Now she panics even more, because then she realizes halfway through that she doesn't want to mess it up, but it's too late because now she has messed it up.
Yeah.
It's, oh man, it's a nightmare. The best thing to do is down, have a conversation and say, look, I am starting to change because I learned about healthy attachment. It means you and I can connect as people. If there's anything we need to talk about, please let's talk about it. We're going to have to rebuild new boundaries, but please understand, I want to connect with you. If you're afraid that there's something wrong with you that I'm going to find, let's talk about that too, because the worst thing we could do is predict what people are going to do and then act on it, and it's wrong. So let's work together. That's the heart of good attachment, is just even laying out, like, I'm an anxious person. Here's what I've been doing. I don't want to do that anymore. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to this relationship with you. Can we build a relationship where we cooperate? It can be that simple. It can be 8 seconds and you have that talk. Even that can stop a lot of that decay and a lot of that destruction. You got to let the other person know what you're doing.
It seems like so much of breaking these patterns is noticing them. And
yes.
And it sounds like such a banal statement, but two people, when they're, they're just in their lines, like if it's like a battlefield and they're in their formations, and it's only that you can see the full picture when you rise above it, and you can say, hey, why are we doing this? Like, I can see the entire thing now. That starts to deconstruct these sort of, I don't know if you can call them alters or sub-personalities that just automatically get triggered and go after each other.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the kind of common dynamic, I guess you could say, is the avoidant man and the anxious woman. Why do you think that most men are more avoidant? Is that just simply because of the nature of as a man, and I'm not trying to go too far down this path, but I think it's fair to say that, as a man, you do kind of have to create yourself. You have to kind of prove yourself. There's, especially as you get older, society tends to have less sympathy. And so as part of the initiation as a man, people can get really into it, talk about it as performance. Does that necessarily lead to this idea that you have to because you see it. I don't know what you'd say the proportions are, but I mean, maybe is it 80-20? Maybe it's not quite that extreme, but it's definitely a majority of guys who have an attachment issue are going to be more in the avoidant than the anxious, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, the research shows about 50% of Americans have secure attachment, about 25% have avoidant, about 20% have anxious, and about 5% have disorganized, the mix, the avoidant. All the nice guys, you know, who are eager to please and trying to please their girlfriend, that's the anxious style. The guys who are playing the games with them but discutting and ghosting them when it gets too real, that's the avoidant piece. And women very similar. I think that it's easier maybe for men to play the avoidant game because our sex drive is okay with that. Our sex drive isn't so focused on emotional intimacy. It's like, hey, look at those two rocks. It looks kind of like boobs. Hey, I can have sex. Who can I have sex with? That's kind of the male sex drive. The female sex drive, the first 6 or a year of a relationship is, hey, I like this guy. I want to keep him connected to me. I'm going to bond with him and have these experiences and do this. And then as you settle into that relationship a year in or so, her drive like tanks if the emotional intimacy is low, because the emotional intimacy, the more she comes in, the more time she has with them and the more sex they have, the more likely it is they're going to have a baby, especially from 20,000 years ago when our brains are built for, the more likely they're going to have a baby, and the more likely she's going to need someone to help provide and take care of while she's pregnant, in an ice age kind of situation. The more natural that she would need a protector, the more she needs that emotional intimacy to know he's bonded to her. He's not just going to get up and walk off with the next 20-year-old blonde he sees walk by. All of those things, the emotional intimacy is key. And women often cannot achieve orgasm without the emotional intimacy there either. That oxytocin, they have to build up oxytocin from connecting with you. And then that helps them have an orgasm, which then helps them have more and helps a whole chain of events. And that right there also bonds them back to you. The female sex drive just doesn't really work when they're avoidant. It's just them basically trying to masturbate with your body in hookup culture, which only works with a small sliver of women who are strong enough to be able to go out and actively enjoy using other people. Men are able to be avoidant. Women are able to be anxious, of chasing and pulling and trying to please for women, and men of pulling away and getting what they want anyway. It's like our biology is suited to those styles as the next best thing to being secure. It's just harder to maintain it the other way, I think.
Yeah, and I think part of the other thing is that these attachments are really a spectrum in a certain sense.
Sure.
And so you could have within a secure attached dynamic, maybe the man is, slightly more avoidant than the woman is. And so I guess the question with that is does because there's a lot of people who are going to be asking this, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Diminishing this sort of anxious avoidant dynamic, does it decrease polarity in the relationship
and pulling away from each other kind of thing?
Yeah. I mean, because so this is one of the other things is that, and this is a corollary to that, but the sex at the beginning of when you first start to date someone in the early stages, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. There's all sorts of fantasy projections and stuff going on, right? But everybody's all about the honeymoon phase sex. But then you have the sex that comes later on in a marriage, and a lot of the guys who don't subscribe to what you're talking about of getting deeper and more connection, they believe almost that it's kind of like, are you spiking desire in a woman from fear, or are you spiking it versus connection? Yep. And so I guess, is it, this is getting a little convoluted, so I apologize, but I'm just kind of thinking out loud as I say it.
Hey, go for it.
There are women themselves who will say that it's like and this probably is because they have some degree of like anxious attachment themselves, that they were way more turned on from the guy who wasn't available mm-hmm. than the guy who was. Now, is that just because she never got to that point of being able to connect with someone in a secure manner. That
It's
she,
usually,
yeah, that's what you would say, is that's
well, there's a few pieces there. She was that into the emotionally unavailable guy who would never get too close to see that she was worthless, who mistreated her so she felt he was honest, who was never going to challenge her and reveal her weaknesses on the inside so she could figure out a way to just keep him around forever if she just did good things to make him happy. That was more secure for her than then trying to connect to a guy that she has no idea what he wants. He's being nice to her, so she thinks he's being dishonest. It's not that they even achieve climax with anybody. A lot of women with anxious style have never achieved climax and will never until they fix their attachment. It's that it made more sense to them early on in the relationship. But yeah, a lot of them have never got with a healthy guy and been with him for long enough and haven't been with an unhealthy guy even long enough. Because then the relationship starts to nosedive. And then she just starts trying to put intimacy into the relationship to make him happier and doing all kinds of stuff, which might bring some physical pleasure, but it doesn't bring fulfillment really for her. That's why a lot of women, when they finally build healthy intimacy, attachment, secure attachment, their sex drive goes through the roof and they start achieving orgasm and multiples. And then they start like really loving it. And they will tell the guy, I have never felt this way about anyone. And I've never had the experience I've had with you where we actually care about each other. It's a huge change, because the female drive long term is built on emotional intimacy. It's built on secure attachment or not. So the guys that complain that their marriage is dead, the dead bedroom really comes from broken attachment and low intimacy, really where it comes from.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
So,
and so it's interesting that as you've seen increasing attachment issues across society, that the you know, I remember 15, 20 years ago when this first started to really come out, you know, Cosmo magazine, they started to really push this idea about like female pleasure from a very mechanical. And one of the things, and it just kind of reeks of avoidant attachment.
Yes, it does.
You know, I've seen this with clients and with girls that they've dated, that the girl that uses a vibrator, usually, if that may be the absolute only way that she can come, and I've kind of looked at it like vibrators are for women what porn is for men. And
Often.
and would you say that porn, the corollary to that would be that porn kind of induces more of an avoidant sort of behavior because a man doesn't have to get emotionally close to a woman? It's a way to help.
It is a huge way to just get what feels like some sexual release, some sexual intimacy. Then you're programming yourself to make sexual encounters even more avoidant, because then guys who use, they go into a sexual encounter and they're focusing on acts and body parts instead of focusing on a shared mutual experience. Like, hey, you and I are here together. Let's share this experience. It's fun. It's great. Let's do this. It'll be wonderful. And checking in with her and laughing with her and having fun with her. He's like, all right, I saw this on this film. I got to recreate this. Now I got to recreate this. This is probably what she wants. So I'm going to recreate this. Now and he's so focused on those acts and those body parts that he forgets she's in the room. And at the end, he's like, oh, I forgot you were here. That kind of experience, a lot of women complain about, and that's very, very tied into that porn culture of just do it and get it done and program yourself that way for years until you get a girlfriend. It's big time, huge time.
Mm. So anxious guys, it sounds like, have a pretty rough dating life.
Yeah, they're the guys that nice guys finish last or not at all. That's why they get left behind when they're on the dating apps, and like 10% of dudes are pulling down 90% of women, 90% of dudes who are pulling down like nothing. They're the nice guys who are out there trying to please women. That is not attractive at all. That's not what women want. And even dating apps themselves have their own problems because the populations are so, I believe a lot of the attachment leads into the dating piece. So the dating pool, I think, are even more attachment problem focused than the random population. It's not attractive to be a nice guy who is trying to earn approval desperately from women who also either want to earn your approval, and so you're going to try to get too close and they're going to push back because you're not stable, or they are avoidant, where they're just not really interested in you. You're just not that attractive. You're just kind of like, eh. So they might use you once and then ghost you because it gives them a feeling of power and superiority. That's, yeah, nice guys have like they're the worst experience out of all the groups.
And so it sounds like, I mean, and obviously we're not going to say that there are no secure attached people on online dating, but that
yeah,
it tends to draw in the avoidance and the anxious people.
It does, because that people with secure attachment often come from secure families, and they know other secure families. They get married young and they get connected to other secure families. They get married young. Their social network connects them to people, and that's the healthiest way to do it. Is your social network says, "Hey, connect to so and so. I know so and so. Okay, I'll date them." And then there's a mutual pressure to be respectful, to be considerate, to take it seriously, to work together cooperatively, and acting upon each other like strangers can. And there's that pressure, and then they build a healthier, secure relationship. And then people who are insecure with insecure attachment look around and say, well, dang, everyone healthy is already married. What am I supposed to do? It's not the case where there's no one healthy out there, but it is a known phenomenon that does tend to happen. So the earlier you can catch it, the more likely you are to have a range of partners instead of a few. But there are a lot of people out there dating right now, a lot of healthy people who are waking up to this. So nobody lose hope. Nobody lose hope.
Yeah. Do you? I mean, do you believe? I mean, I know that. Okay, let me, because I don't want to give you like a super easy one here. Obviously, in theory, everybody can change, because if the will to change is there, then it'll happen. But how do you see, like, because there's been just so much damage. I mean, there's been so much damage that's been done, even just in the last decade. I mean, I'm not, neither of us, we're not that old. You know what I mean? I mean, I'm like, I'm not going to say 34, I'm 34 years old. I'm not going to say I'm like a spring chicken or anything like that, but it's been like a decade maybe since I was dating. But just even over the course of that decade, the degree to which things have changed is really remarkable in a bad way.
Yes.
And so I guess, is is there a certain point where someone's just not going to make it? Like they're not going to get there. Is there a certain level of damage? And have you been able, are there any tells?
That's a good question. It's encouraging and discouraging at the same time. The research shows that as things have got worse, you're exactly right. As they've got worse over the last decade or two, the number of young people who are actually having sex has gone way down. They're not even engaging in those relationships anymore. I remember reading about a phenomenon over in Japan called like this, they call it like the sexodus, where Japanese men are just pulling away from society and just engaging in their hobbies, and they've completely shut it off. That'd be like the red pill, the MGTOW movement of men going their own way. That's that happening over here, and that's deeper and deeper. And women doing the same thing of just, this is disgusting and toxic. I'm terrified. I'm pulling out. I'm away. I don't even know what to do. And there's so many of those. It is the point where the hardest place I see to come back from is when someone has shut everyone out of their life. They no connections. They've been abused. They've been hurt. Maybe they've been divorced, no kids, and they are alone and miserable, and they've pretty much given up on life. That is the hardest place to come back from, because now they've given up not only on life, like, here, you can fix attachment. Well, great, Adam. That's great. I don't really believe that, but I don't even really care, because life is so crap. It's just, why would I even want to come back from this? It would take so much work. That is the hardest person to convince, because if I convince them that attachment is real and that they can heal from it and that it works for them too, just like it works for other people, there is so much work, and they are so tired, and they don't even know who they would connect with. And then they have to learn all of this while they're alone and then rebuild those relationships. And that's the hardest. But if they want it, I have happen. I teach them through it. I show them what to do. I show them where to make friends. It's not as hard as they think. And within a few months, maybe 4 or 5 months, they can live a more fulfilling life that they're actually enjoying. But it takes a lot of convincing. It takes a lot of convincing to believe that it's even possible and that the work is even worth it. That is the worst place to come back from.
So one of the questions I get asked, frankly, too much. It's like, and maybe you get asked it too. It's not hating on the guys who ask it, but
I go for it.
guys are so obsessed with a woman's notch count.
Mm-hmm.
But it's one of those things that asking the question, obsessing over the question, is an indication of their own kind of anxiety and stuff. But at the same time, you can't just completely dismiss it out of hand, because, like, is there, in your perspective, is it like a chicken egg thing? Like, which let me phrase this better. Does a woman sleeping with a lot of guys, does it cause, I mean, it causes damage, but does it cause, like, does it get to a point where it becomes really irreparable for pair bonding, for them to come back from it?
You know, the psychology community does not allow that topic to be discovered, to be really studied here in America. That's one of those pieces of research that gets banned, that gets pulled out of. You're not allowed to do it.
Yeah.
Does women experiencing multiple sexual partners and those bonds, does that diminish their ability to pair bond? The question specifically there is if they are achieving orgasm and achieving oxytocin bonding with all of those partners, especially does that, because then they've oxytocin bonded to all those partners, does that diminish that pair bonding? We're not really allowed to cover that research here in the West very much. It's one of those topics. It's like, we're not covering quite a number of things. It's not allowed to be published in the journals, so we don't know. We don't know on that regard. I will say this: I have worked with a number of men who come in who are just terrified. Like, my girlfriend, I don't want to be shallow, but my girlfriend has this body count way higher than mine, and I just feel worthless. Feel like she's just not gonna, like, why would she want me? I can't keep up with her experience. I'm not going to give her the things she wants. And what does that mean? Can I even trust her? What if she cheats on me? And I say, dude, wait a minute. Fix your attachment first, and then see if she's healthy and willing to attach. Build that attachment with her, and then see how she responds. Well, I don't know how that's going to change anything. Give it a shot. So they will bond with her. And then almost every single time, what they end up hearing is, or I'll pull the girl in sometimes, and she'll say, I have never ever enjoyed any of those experiences. Like, in the moment there was some physical pleasure, but I've never enjoyed them, and looking back at them, I wish I hadn't done them, and I'm not glad I did them. And most guys, they think that they hear that and they go, well, that can't be real. I would relish every experience. In fact, I wish I had 10 more times experiences than I have. And that's the male view. That's not the female view. And the female view with pleasure is very focused on the experience they had with the other person, which, when they have a high notch count, usually says they don't know how to connect intimately with another human being. So they are getting used, trying to make the other guy like them, is what that usually is. And they're trying to find some kind of connection, because this is the only means they have ever been told is useful in making men connect to them. So if they just have sex with them enough, they will find a guy who will stay with them. And they find this dude who's like, wants to get work, and they're relieved, and now her body count is now the thing that is keeping her back, and she's miserable, she feels guilty, she's disgusted, she's upset, and he's like, no, you really enjoyed it, just admit it. And that usually is the killer. So when they start fixing their attachment, the dudes who are like coming to me crushingly like, I don't know what to say, I'm miserable, I don't know, man, can I even trust her? But me, then why does she want me? They start fixing their attachment, and those questions, they come in a few months later, and they're like, Adam, I don't even know why I asked you those questions. Those are the dumbest questions on earth. Like, I'm realizing I am the only person she has ever emotionally bonded with. She's never let anyone into her heart. She didn't even know how to let people into her heart. She is so fulfilled with me. And now that we're bonded, this woman is doing crazy off the wall stuff with me that I never even imagined. It's this phenomenal experience. I am not even worried about it anymore, because I know for a fact she is bonded to me like she's never been bonded with another human being on earth. That is the typical response I get from guys when they go from that cycle of, her number count to, I don't even care. It is so emotionally intimate, nothing else matters. That's usually the cycle there, and it has to be experienced to be believed.
What you said is really interesting here, especially with the oxytocin bonding portion of it, because it's true. If a woman is, kind of going through the motions, and even if she does come, right, and if she's not experiencing like a flood of connection, is it really affecting her ability to bond with somebody else if she's not experiencing connection with the person that she's sleeping with to begin with? What do
Good
you?
question.
There's something that's actually being broken in that case. I mean, not that it should be done, not that it's a positive way of.
No, I hear you. I think it's her hope that's being broken, because I've worked with plenty of those women. It's their hope that anyone will ever love them goes down the drain more and more with the more men they sleep with. It's the hope that they have anything worthwhile in them because they've been ghosted so many times by guys that they thought would actually care about them. It is hope that they are losing. So if you can give them that hope, it's like a new experience they have never felt. And then the emotional intimacy. I tell guys, even eye contact with a woman can be something. Like, most guys are so fixated on the parts that they forget to look her in the eye and talk to her during, tickle her, have a joke, laugh, play while you are making love. Don't just do the animal experience. That right there, when they start experiencing it, blows those away because you are giving them an experience they've never felt before. And those women, you are then flooding them with oxytocin. And what happens is this: if they've never experienced much oxytocin in childhood, they don't know to chase in adulthood. So then they're just giving away their body in adulthood, hoping somebody somehow will accept them and love them. But they get very little oxytocin at all in childhood or in adulthood. Then they experience you, and this is why anxious women are attached to avoidant men, is avoidant men love bomb them and give them that oxytocin for the first time in their life. And they freak out because he's the drug dealer that she let go of now, because he's the only person on earth who can ever give her oxytocin. Same thing when they experience that oxytocin with their children. They become obsessed, like their kids are the drug dealers now for them. They need that bond and they need their kids to be okay. If you can give her that oxytocin for the first time in her life, her brain becomes hyper protective of that source of oxytocin. It's like a diamond mine that she stumbled on in her backyard and now has to guard it tooth and nail to keep your relationship amazing, which will sometimes make her more anxious for a while, but it also make her more hyper protective and more leaning into your relationship with her. You become the greatest man who has ever lived on the face of the earth, because you are the only one who has given her that oxytocin she's been craving her whole life. That right there is what most men miss, because we don't have that experience. We might have the oxytocin flow, but it doesn't really happen during the sexual experience. We're like, yeah, sex is there, that's cool. It's that oxytocin flow, though, for women. You become the greatest man who's ever walked on the face of this planet. That's how you do it. And that is what makes up for a lot of that damage. You're giving hope and then showing her why you have what no other man has ever given her. That's the experience.
So avoidant attachment women, they also love bomb.
Often, yes. And in their way, sometimes it's just sexual experiences. It's just, hey, I'm having sex with this anxious dude. Look at him. He's just drooling all over me. That's often what that can be.
So, because this is a question, and maybe you can help break this apart for me. So, girl games, something I talk about a lot, is something what we would say like daddy's girls will often do, and they play up the guy's ego. They make the guy feel like he's, the best ever in bed. He's never been more connected to somebody before. And even if the guy is maybe himself avoidant and doesn't necessarily want to get involved with that girl at first, because she keeps kind of giving him this stuff, it starts to pull him in. And then when he gets pulled in, then it's like the table gets pulled out from under him, and then she flips it. So was that girl avoidant the entire time, and they were just kind of sparring with each other to avoidant people with their little duel?
That's often exactly what has happened there. She out love bombed him. That's exactly usually what has happened there. And if he tried to love bomb her in return, then they'll start fighting over it, and then they'll start pulling away, and it's going to get really ugly. Yeah.
Huh. Okay. Super interesting here. Disorganized attachment. Talk a little bit about that.
Disorganized. So it is the ultimate hot and cold of, nope, I don't need one. I'm completely fine. But I need this person. And then they become fixated on that one person. And then it terrifies them that they're fixated on that person. So they shove the person out and devalue the person. And then they're miserable that they did that. So like, no, I totally didn't mean that. And they really didn't. So they pull them back in. And it's this constant hot and cold, can't figure out. It's disorganized. It's all over the place. They can't figure out what they want. The other person's like, what is happening? Why do you love me one day and hate me the next day? it is not borderline personality disorder. It's not a full personality disorder, but it's heading in that story of completely loving trashing, and can't figure out what they want. And there's something just not right here. And they're chaotic and they're stressed out about it and they're all over the place. And they recognize they're doing something really wrong and they don't know how to fix it. And they're just as frustrated with themselves as everyone else is. That's usually the disorganized experience.
Gotcha. So, do disorganized people, I mean, I can see how a securely attached person would fall for maybe like an anxious girl who's kind of more in the anxious or avoid. But is it unlikely that a secure person is going to end up with a disorganized just based on the chaotic nature of how they behave?
It's tough. The times that I've seen it happen is a guy maybe with autism or a woman with autism, and they have secure attachment or mostly secure attachment, and they don't understand why a person would act this way. So they're taking the person in good faith and they think just something is wrong. So we just need to logically solve it together and then it will be fine. And they pair up often with the person who has that disorganized style of going completely chaotic. And the person with autism, usually high functioning autism, it's like, okay, well, that's where you're going. Well, that's weird. Well, I've never experienced that before, but let's talk through this. And they will start working on it. And that I've seen that pairing a lot of that disorganized style with the autism piece. I've seen that a remarkable number of times.
Well, it's really interesting because, you said that these disorganized girls, they're sort of like on the way towards borderline in many cases. And not necessarily, but,
Close.
One of the things that Mark talked about was, because I asked him, I've kind of looked at borderline as almost like weaponized femininity. Like it's this, it's boundaryless, right? Like there is no respect for boundaries anywhere, and it's just constantly. And that's kind of like if you were to take feral feminine energy and just kind of throw it out there. And he mentioned the opposite of that. I asked him, like, well, what would that be for a man? And I think some people thought maybe it would be like narcissism, but actually he said schizoid, which is kind of on that direction with the autism individual who's like very, very much emotionally withdrawn. I know that's not exactly the example that you're saying here. This guy may not, high functioning autistic individual may not be emotionally withdrawn. He may not just be able to understand the emotional actions of the other person and to parse it.
Usually they're just confused. They're usually both people are very intelligent, and she or he, because it can be a man or a woman with autism, and then a man or a woman with those chaotic behaviors, and they just take the other person at face value and say, okay, well, we just need to logically solve this problem. We just need to figure out logically what the problem is, and then we can just fix it. And the other has all kinds of suggestions about what's going to fix their emotions at the moment. And the person with autism ends up jumping through all these hoops trying to make them happy. And it's never worked out. And they have no idea what is really wrong. So they just keep jumping through hoops until the other person just tears the marriage apart. It's really hard to see. It's really hard to see. But it does seem to be a piece that I've noticed far too often.
So going further back, I mean, what causes these different, like what will cause anxious attachment? What will cause avoidant? What will cause disorganized in a child?
Sure. So it's in childhood. It's anything. It's not anything, but it's anything where you learn that nobody else is going to meet your needs. And then you change and say, why is that? The child's brain thinks everything is their fault. I've got 4 kids. Everything that happens, they have somehow caused it in their eyes when they're really little. And then they learn to try to blame other people for it, even if it's their fault. But they believe that they have earned whatever has happened to them. So if someone is mean to them, they think they caused it somehow. If you drop something and the TV turns off over here, they think, oh, how did I turn the TV off by dropping this? It's this amazing thing that children do to learn cause and effect. They're trying to learn gravity, right? The 1-year-old drops the plate of spaghetti, it hits the floor, it cracks, it makes a mess, mom yells, this is cause and effect. Same thing with the relationships, but the brain have all that complicated context. It doesn't understand what other people are doing and why. So the brain says when your child is put in the NICU, for example, and for the first 2 to 3 months or weeks or however long, They're crying, 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 and you can touch them with rubber gloves, but you can't hold them. They don't get just 23 and a half hours a day of constant physical contact and comforting and nurturing. You have to try to comfort them as they cry it out. Crying it out in the first 6 months can do that to them. Getting hurt, daycare too early on. Brain says, Mom, I can smell Mom, and she's leaving me with strangers who don't smell like me, and I'm just here with these strangers 12 hours a day, and then Mom comes home, but she's too tired to hold me. There must be something wrong with me that Mom doesn't want to connect with me. And it seems like sometimes some people have avoidant pieces where they say something wrong with other people and they're going to hurt me. And so I screw those people. And then sometimes kids turn inward and say there's something wrong with me, so they're going to abandon me. And the brain welds in the child's brain abandonment with death, because if you're little, 2 years old, you get abandoned, you're going to die. So it welds disapproval and abandonment, imperfection, weakness, vulnerability. It welds them to death in your brain and says, I never open up and connect other people. I can never relax. I can't show who I really am because who I am is garbage and will get me hurt or abandoned. So I need to keep up a wall in front of me and have a perfect image that nobody will try to attack and no one will try to get too close to. And then they carry out into their relationships where they got to ask for their needs to get met as adults. Like, hey, wife, can we have physical intimacy tonight? Can't ask that. So you have to give her 10 nice things over the space of 5 days and hope that she is so overwhelmed with gratitude that she throws herself at you. These are nice guys. Yeah. And you got to push buttons and try to get people to act. So you are pushing buttons to make people act the way you want them to act, to get your needs met and to meet your goals. It's pushing buttons and acting upon people like moving objects instead of working with them one-on-one and saying, hey, here's what I need. Can we work together on this? Because your brain says, remember when I was a little baby and nobody would comfort me? Remember when Mom dropped me off at daycare every day? Remember when I was 4 years old and Mom didn't even have time to look at me for 5 years, and just came home exhausted from working 3 jobs. But I don't know that. She just did never want to spend time with me. Remember when I got hurt? Remember when Dad was too depressed to come spend time with me, but I thought it was my fault? Remember all these pieces that told me it was my fault somehow. The brain just memorizes as a law of the universe. No one will ever love me. So it never occurs to them they grow up to say, well, should I re-challenge a law of the universe? No, I'm just going to act upon it. Then when I teach them attachment, then they're like, I've never seen this. What do I even do? So they want to get better. They have no idea what better even looks like. They've never seen it modeled. They've never experienced better. They have no idea. They just have this vague idea of that something better exists. And even that's pretty torturous. So that right there is where the attachment comes from. And it's why nobody ever challenges it.
So if and when trauma happens, it's kind of up to the individual and their own sort of personality, whether they go the direction towards anxious or avoidant.
It seems to be. I don't know, because I've seen people with anxious pieces who have serious trauma. So it doesn't seem that trauma turns you away from other people. It's something baked into the person's personality of if they're going to go inward and try to appease people, or if they're going to just stomp their foot down and say nobody's ever coming in ever again. It seems to be down to the individual and their personality of what they're going to do.
Right. It's like that Tolstoy quote that all happy families are happy in the same way and all unhappy families are unhappy differently.
I love that quote. And it's very true. Families with secure attachment look the same because they communicate in the same ways. It's open intimacy where they're connected to each other. Unhappy families are all finding unique ways to push each other's buttons to get their needs met and run different cycles. That's the difference.
Mm-hmm. So, but in the case of a disorganized attachment, and I know probably most people aren't going to see that, although they're out there, right? I mean, people out dating. Is that usually that has some more extreme trauma attached to it? Because it almost seems like somebody needs to have gone through enough that they're going to get pulled in. They keep trying each coping strategy to try it because there's so much going on. And I don't know. What do you think? Why do you think?
I haven't seen research on this, but I will say that most of the people I've ever met and worked with who have a disorganized attachment style, they do have a pretty severe trauma piece. Is most of it. There's some severe trauma they've dealt with. Not just a little bit, but usually quite a bit. And they've had a lifelong, sometimes multiple trauma events. that have added up, that have really built in. I have seen that correlation, at least. Yeah, it seems to, it's just more extreme.
Where is psychiatry with all of this right now?
So the understanding is that attachment is for little kids. That there's this cool guy named Bowen who did something once about attachment. There was this guy named Carl Jung who once taught that you can kind of change over the course of your life. But we take a medical model here in the United States. Take a pill. What is that? What is that saying from that book? Take a gram, don't give a damn.
Mm-hmm.
United States, it is fix it, fix it, fix it. But don't make me feel more pain during the fixing, so just fix it. And a lot of pills, and then a lot of validating of feelings of, I am so sorry that you are having this experience. You are so lucky that you're alive, but I am so sorry you're having this. This is so terrible. It must be so bad for you. And not very many, hey, you could fix this. Here's the things you're going to have to do, and here's the hard conversations you're going to have to go have. Here's some tools to help you have them. You need to go do this work, or nothing's ever going to get better. That's hard to sell. That's hard to sell. It's very much easier for people, especially when they don't believe it's possible to get better. They demand a medical fix. People themselves demand a medical fix. I can't really blame the medical system when most people, every person who has an attachment issue, doesn't believe it can get better, so they start demanding a medical fix, and then the medical system steps in and says, okay, yeah, heck yeah, we'll give you a pill. And the pill companies step in and say, yes, we will give you 10 pills. And it just flows from there. So when you teach people it's possible to change, they really circumvent a lot of that. And that's a big reason why I left the healthcare system, was because it was not popular to stand up. And I've taught seminars with other professionals. I've taught this. It's hard to get people, even professionals, to buy into the belief that it really could, at the root of it, be a problem in our relationships and a problem with our belief of how we fit in relationships. If you tell them that could be responsible for example, borderline, bipolar disorder, bipolar 1 with full manic episodes. If you explain, and I've worked with doctors who agree, if you explain that could be hugely caused by attachment issues, and then show the chart of how borderline, I keep saying borderline, how bipolar works and fits to the attachment piece. And then I tell them I have done work with people who have bipolar, and I have helped them come out of it and have no more manic episodes and go off their medications for years, no manic episodes. And if they do have one, it is nothing. It is nothing like what it was before. And they've built in the attachment. The reason for the manic episodes goes away, and their brain chemistry levels out. And I've worked with doctors who've authenticated this. If you tell them that, they don't believe it. They just don't believe it's possible to get better.
They don't want to believe it's possible themselves.
Many of them don't want to believe it's possible, because then they'd have to do really hard work, and all the years that they've put into not fixing it feel wasted. But many of them, it's terrifying to believe it's possible, because then what if it's only possible for other people but not for me? Mm-hmm. Because the belief is that there's something wrong with you deep down. It's layers of complex problems that keep a person stuck. Yeah.
It's I'm not educated professionally psychologically, right? Sure. And often I wish I was, but often I'm glad I'm not, because it kept me. I didn't, it's when you say this, when you talk about something that's so intuitively accurate as attachment, you at the very least you look at it and you can say this plays a pretty key role in things. And yet people go through almost all this stuff that just is there to convince them that it isn't this simple. It doesn't mean it's necessarily easy to fix it, right? But it's that kind of simple, and that we have to go through all, spit out all sorts of different terminology and different diagnoses, which, levels of neurosis that are constantly evolving, and, where's the double-blind placebo study? It is just pretty mind-boggling. But it's great though that you've been able to go in and you've been able to see what it's like in that environment, and then coming out of it, and because then you have the contrast point. You know what they're talking about. I know cognitive behavioral therapy is a big thing, and I just keep. I don't know. What do you think about CBT?
So that was one of the big schooling pieces. I was trained extensively in CBT, and I like parts of it because it's a very methodical approach, and they show results based things. But man, they miss attachment often. Pairing CBT with attachment work is a power combo. I'm thinking there's some research in I think it was Finland. I think it was Finland that a decade back, a decade maybe to maybe 15 years back, they did some research in Finland with people who had full schizophrenia, and they
Mhm.
brought them in, and they brought their families in, and they put them in a clinic, and they said we will absolutely not medicate these people with schizophrenia at all. Zero medication for them at all. What we're going to do is do extensive family therapy of reuniting the families, building love and acceptance, and training the family on how to help the person when they have an episode of schizophrenia, but healing their bonds of their family, which really is just another way of saying attachment. It's
Sure.
just not using the word attachment. They healed the families and built loving support networks where the people with schizophrenia could get that help instead of being rejected, yelled at, treated badly. If they had an issue, the family would come together and help them through it. What they found was that the people who had schizophrenia, their number of episodes vastly decreased. The number of severity of those episodes vastly decreased, and their hospitalization rates dropped to zero.
Mm.
Dropped to zero. Where it became so much easier to bond with and connect with and manage all those problems that with no medication at all, they got achieved better results than we achieve over here in the United States with full medical compliance.
Mm.
Like here in the United States, if you get schizophrenia, your life is effectively over here. They teach your life is effectively over. You just get on disability, you take medications, and people just yell at you all the time for having a mental illness. That's the United States view of schizophrenia, and it is. It's horrible. That is not the case other places. And when you fix attachment, even that may not get fixed 100%, but it gets so much better. That's what that research can show. So it's attachment touches everything, whether it causes it or not, it touches everything. And we really need to focus on it here in this country for us to get better.
Now, I had heard through the grapevine about this technique that you're familiar with. Maybe you work with people on for trauma release that involves something with eye movement. It's very
Yeah.
so. Tell me a bit about that, about how it helps people to process trauma and what it does exactly.
Okay, so two pieces with PTSD, because PTSD was one of my clinical specialties while I was practicing as a psychotherapist. When you have attachment issues, and you have a trauma experience, any trauma experience, even without attachment issues, your brain tries to answer two questions. What are all the factors that went into this trauma so that I can predict if it's going to happen again? And if it does, how do I keep myself safe if it does happen again so I don't get this hurt? Those are the two questions. Now, when you have these attachment issues, your brain chronically diminishes the logical side to fuel ongoing emotional storms on the right side. So you're often chronically logically diminished when you have attachment issues and emotionally spiked. And it's easier then to spike. Even if you're not chronically diminished, you get chronically triggered, as we say all the time, where your logic goes away. So you start acting illogically and irrationally to try to resolve the pain that you anticipate is coming. That's why people with attachment issues, they become very illogical in a lot of relationships. Their brain is doing this all the time. And that right there is why you can't process trauma very well. It makes it harder to process trauma because you can't figure out what all the factors are. So now every factor that went into it and anything that ever reminds you of it is scary. And you don't believe anybody else will ever help you stay safe from that trauma because you don't deserve it. So then your brain says, I'm just going to get it again. The only thing I can do is worry more. So it decreases the threshold for getting PTSD off of events, and you're more likely to get PTSD from a trauma when you have attachment issues. Now, the way I have to explain all that because the way to fix it is eye movement desensitization reprogramming, EMDR. Eye movement desensitization reprogramming, which involves think about the trauma to a point where you're sitting there and you're kind of stressed out, and then they do their fingers back and forth in front of your eyes and you hold still. You just track it really far off to each side, and what that does is each eye is controlled by the opposing side of the brain. So as you're thinking about the trauma, it forces that emotional thought back across the brain and finally processes that emotional trauma, the memories on the logical brain. And then the brain starts saying, oh, that's why that happened. Oh, that's how I keep myself safe. Oh, it was only these couple factors that happened. I just need to watch for those. of course that's not going to happen again. I just have to watch for this. And it starts logically processing those traumas that you experience instead of emotionally tagging them. So it starts diminishing the high emotional volatility from touching those memories. And that starts to diminish. And then you don't get that high emotional spike from touching those memories accidentally because your brain's not afraid that you're about to die. So it logically processes it. And you do this with your traumas, and it completely starts leveling out the brain. And then you can function more fully and more logically because you don't have all those landmines buried in your brain. So I'll say it again: eye movement desensitization reprogramming, EMDR. It's fantastic treatment.
So it basically helps the brain to stop compartmentalizing where the emotion is, where the experience.
Exactly. It processed logically. There's very little talking. It's just getting to know you and making sure you aren't dissociating, because dissociating can foul up that process. But it's very little talking, and it's very solution focused, and it works for most people. And it's very thorough and very permanent relief for most people who go through it.
Wow, that's interesting. So you would say, so people who have either avoidant or anxious attachment tend to be more susceptible to PTSD from events?
Their threshold for getting PTSD off of a trauma event is much, much lower. It is much likely to happen that they will develop PTSD.
Right. And I would imagine especially anxious of the two types.
Yes, I would say both, but avoidant at least has some control over their life. So yeah, I would say anxious is probably the most likely to develop that PTSD response.
And I guess the difficult thing with avoidant is that in that moment, they may be able to handle it because they can dissociate, but then it shocks them later on. It comes back later on when they're not expecting it to happen.
No, it makes them not just avoidant with other people, but angry and spiky and hard and pushing. And it's that uncle you knew who came back from war, and he wasn't really great beforehand because he came from a troubled family, but now he is just angry all the time and spiky and hard to get to know, and he bites at you all the time. That's kind of where a lot of people with avoidant style, then they go into the PTSD. That's a lot of what more it is. It's those anger pieces of stay away from me. I don't want anyone close to me because I really will die, and I will hurt you if I have to, if you get too close to me and push on me too hard. That's where a lot of that looks like.
Gotcha. Okay, so I want to, just before, I know we're coming up on time here, but I want to respect your time. This has been really just so incredible, Adam. I do want to ask one more question, though, on the dating front. And this is because on the relationship side, you're in a relationship with someone, your connection is shut down because you've pulled back. Maybe I'm speaking especially to most of the guys who are watching this are probably have avoidant tendencies, and they need to open up more in their relationships. They need to try to form, focus on intimacy, focus on connection, and being more present with the children, right? If they have children. If there's anything you have to add to that, please let me know. But yeah, go ahead. Just jump in if you add to it.
If you have attachment issues, you probably don't know the good things that you need to do to build healthy attachment. It's not just about not doing the bad. It's doing the good so you build them. So if kids at all, fix your attachment, learn how to boost that with your kids and build it with your kids. That is one of the best gifts you could possibly give to your children. Whether your wife is angry at you or not, if any of this is resonating with you, fix your attachment, teach it to your kids. It's the best thing you could do as a parent.
The good thing about being in a relationship, though, is even if you're having attachment issues, you've already kind of hit some threshold of being attached because you're together and you've had kids together. So there's something there that you guys can, assuming it's not too late, right? That there's something that you can build off of. For the people who are dating, I think that this is, and this is something that I work with guys in dating and relationship capacity. I know you do as well. And one of the things that I think can be difficult is that, okay, well, you're in a relationship, so you're doing these things to increase more intimacy. You're doing these things to connect more. But there's a level of like, well, we can fight, we can be here. No one's going to split like tomorrow if something happens, Whereas with your dating and you have an attachment issue, how do you go about doing that with someone there's the game, right? People play games. But is it, to a certain extent, necessary to put up some degree of a game at the very beginning in order to get to a point where the other person will take you seriously? Because if you're a guy, avoidant guy with an anxious woman, and well, maybe now you guys are together and you have to try to move this relationship to more of a secure position. But if you hadn't played those games at the beginning, then you wouldn't have been with her at all to begin with. And so it creates all sorts of interesting questions. So I'm just curious, like how are in practice people supposed to bring attachment to these early stages of dating and still be able to create some degree of, desirability?
Yeah. People with secure attachment find secure attachment to be very attractive. In fact, that's one of the biggest things they really unconsciously look for in their relationships. They want somebody who is securely attached and can have honest, straightforward conversations. You don't have to say, hey, let's get married on the first date. That's not good attachment either. But you could say, hey, you know what? I'm looking for a healthy relationship. I'd like for it to end in marriage. I don't want to be dating for 5 years, date for a year and a half, something like that. That's what I'm looking for. And these tools of being able to work together. Have you ever heard of attachment? It's this thing where you work together securely and you work as a team instead of playing games, instead of trying to push each other's buttons, instead of faking it for the first 7 months, like research shows. Instead of doing all of that and let's going on dates and then pretending we only eat salads and then we finally eat our first hamburger in front of each other. Instead of playing that game, can we be honest with each other? Can we ask each other real questions? Can we give real answers? Are you the kind of person who wants to work together in a team, or are you the kind of person who wants to push buttons? Because if you want to work as a team, I am here for it. I'm through with the games. I am through with pushing, but I want to get to know you, and we're going to have fun. But I want to know that we can work together as a team. And if we can't, let me know now. If that's not what you're looking for, you are just looking for fun. You are just looking for casual, no harm done. Let's finish our dinner. We'll laugh. We will shake hands, and we'll part ways. Absolutely no bad blood. But this is what I want. Is that what you want to? And it can be that. It can be that drawn out. It can be simpler than that. Healthy people will hear that and be like, well, yeah, I'd like to focus on marriage too. I don't really want to just play this casual game forever. And it can be as deep or involved as you want it. It doesn't have to be like, well, here's this principle of attachment. It can be like, hey, you know what? I want to play this game. I want to be connected. Do you want to build this relationship? Are you looking for a long-term thing? If so, let's talk about working as a team. How does that look like? What does it look like for you to have a marriage? What does your ideal relationship look like? You can have those conversations early on. People always say, is it too early to bring it up in the first couple of dates? No, not really, because you're testing to see if the other person is going to be able to have those conversations with you, or if they're going to get up from the table and run. If they get up and run, they usually have an avoidant attachment style. If they think you're a little weird, they'll sit in there, still kind of listen to it, and then they'll probably like what they hear, because there's no one on earth that when you say, hey, I just want to be honest, I want to be connected, I want to work with you, I never want to ever play a game with you, I never want to push your buttons and be fake, I am going to be 100% open and authentic with you, and I want to build something cool with you. If the other person responds to that with yuck, then you have lost nothing. But you attract people who are the same. So be yourself. Be yourself on those first dates. Be the best version of you and put it out there what you actually want. That's what I tell people about attachment.
And I guess that because you mentioned about how they go about saying it, I guess that's really the big issue for some of these guys, which is that if they were to go and say it, if they feel very insecure themselves, that they they say it, it's like out of the frying pan into the fire, like they're saying this agenda behind it, even though they're trying not to, and so you get caught up in these sort of layers and layers of it. But
fix it first before you get in a relationship. If you're not in one now, fix it first. Don't get a girlfriend and then try to fix it. Fix it now with your friends and with your family. Fix your attachment. 2-3 people that you need. You'll receive love and acceptance. I have all kinds of stuff to teach you how to do this. Fix it first, then get into a relationship and then talk about it. You could say, I have a past history of some attachment pieces. If I ever do them again, here's what they would look like. Here's how you and I could work on these things together. Have you ever experienced pieces like this attachment? Is there anything on your side that I need to know? It can lead to a great conversation. And it can also show that you have done the work, aware, you're handing them the red flags, you're showing them how you've worked on them and what to do about them. That makes you more stable and desirable than before.
Yeah, and it's also the more that you understand how attachment works and how you understand yourself and how you work, that increases your discernment and your ability to even figure out. Maybe you won't even have to say that to a girl, because you'll be able to tell pretty quickly that yeah, this girl is all about games.
Yep.
And you'll draw those people into your dating life less and less.
It becomes pretty obvious. That's people with avoidance will love bomb you. That's why healthy people back way off. When you're too nice to them, healthy people back way off because it's a bad sign. Healthy people wait and they invest. Girls who are dating a healthy guy for the first time say, it's really boring. He's not doing anything. Yeah, he's waiting. He's investing. Give it time and you will see depth of emotional connection you've never seen before, but you have to wait and give it some time.
Adam, this was just so amazing, so incredible. I mean, you really are the attachment specialist. I learned a lot from this.
Thank you, man.
And I really appreciate what you've been doing, and I appreciate you sharing it with us today. Love to continue this conversation in the future. For now, though, where can guys find you? Tell us about your services. Tell us about what you offer, and where we can. I'll put everything below in the description.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm a coach. I teach coaching. That's what I do. I coach you through the problems. If you have a problem, I will show you how to fix it step by step, how to have the conversations, the phrasing to use, who to talk to first, how to make a list of the people, how to approach it in dating, how to approach it and how to have great dates. I'll show you how to fix it in your marriage. I'll show you all of that step by step in my coaching. Best way to find me, I'm on, first of all, is on Instagram. If you need to DM me with questions, I'm on Instagram. I am at Attachment Adam on Instagram. I'm also on TikTok. Apparently, I'm blowing up over there pretty big. One of my videos got like 5 million views talking about attachment and how it doesn't work in hookup culture for women. It's a big topic I talk about. On TikTok, I am at Attachment Bro. I'm the bro of attachment. Those are the 2 best places to find me. But Instagram, if you have DM me, Attachment Adam. Just remember that.
Gotcha. Adam, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I'll see you online.
Thanks for having me.